Okay, so I'm just going to say it and say it out loud. Not everybody should be a leader. Plain and simple. Leadership is a learned trait. That's true. We have multitudes of leadership organizations across the country that teach leadership, higher ed, and there's books on leadership. Do a quick Google search on books on leadership and you will find there's a bunch of them out. But not everybody should be a leader. That's because they may not have something we call emotional intelligence. There's actually a book about emotional intelligence. I welcome you to check it out and whenever you have a moment about emotional intelligence, because it kind of comes down to maturity in a sense. But sometimes leadership requires people to make decisions in an immediate way that are going to impact a lot of people, and they might struggle with that. Or maybe they don't quite have the personality for the job. So I came across this blog, it's not research-based, but I wanted to talk about it. It says adults who haven't matured emotionally usually displays 8 behaviors without realizing it. I just kind of wanted to go over a few of them that I think are important, particularly whether you're going into principal leadership or superintendent leadership. I also want to point it out to you that if you're in education in general and you have a principal or a leader that demonstrates some of these traits, you might want to consider working for another organization. Just a thought. The first one out of the box is they avoid responsibility. Those who haven't matured emotionally often dodge responsibility. Meaning, now there's a difference between delegating, which is an important part of being a leader and being a part of an organization, is delegating authority, delegating tasks. That's different than just simply not facing a responsible task, something that you're expected to do and that you just simply don't do it. So instead of if you find someone who is shifting their blame, they don't take ownership, or something happens and they're quick to point the finger at somebody else, you might be dealing with somebody who isn't emotionally intelligent enough to handle the position. Second one is they struggle with empathy. Now, I don't know how often this is going to come up in a principal or a superintendent role, but you might want to be listening and looking for some of these behaviors. If maybe you have a leader who's not empathetic to maybe a parent situation or a poverty situation or an issue on a campus, or maybe they don't quite show empathy towards you if you're having a personal crisis, a mental health challenge, something like that. That is also a concern as well if you have somebody who struggles with showing empathy. And more importantly, they don't understand the meaning of building those strong relationships with people. This one's a big one too. They're often peacekeepers, but they're not peacemakers. And there's a big difference. The yes people, the people around you, like they don't want to get anybody upset, so they kind of walk on eggshells all the time. So they're constantly trying to keep the peace instead of building that relationship and connecting with people, because oftentimes we're human and what happens is we do disagree, and disagreement is okay. Now, constant argument and disagreement, that's just dysfunction. That's a whole separate thing. But if you're dealing with somebody who's off and walking around trying to keep the peace, let's not upset them, let's not talk about that, that's not really a leader. A leader is going to confront issues head on. We're going to talk about it. We're going to get to the meat of what's going on, and we're going to make sure that these issues don't happen again. If you have somebody or work with somebody that's not willing to do that, you might have someone who's not emotionally intelligent to handle the job. All right, this is a big one. They can't handle criticism. That means they don't have people around them that telling them that the job they're doing is not good, or the idea that they have is, could be tweaked, or whether it's constructive criticism or not. They might struggle with hearing how other people feel about their leadership. They'll get defensive. They'll get angry. They might even shut down, close their door, and hide from you if they're faced with criticism. If they have the kind of personality where maybe they view that you're not attacking the idea, you're not questioning the idea, you might be questioning them personally. That's a big one. If they can't handle hearing someone else disagree with them, that's a sign of an emotional intelligence deficit in that person. And the last one, and this is the most important one that I think is significant to this particular article, is they resist change. You cannot absolutely be in a leadership position if you can't handle the idea of change. Change is inevitable. It's a part of everything we do. The root of being a good leader is how you respond to that change when it comes. So the idea is that you have to be able to know and understand when something is happening and how you plan to adjust to it by having the right people in place, the right policies in place, the right ideas in place. And if you see something happening, responding to it in an appropriate way. People who can't embrace change, even though it's uncomfortable, may not have the emotional intelligence to move on. And this may go back to the people who are peacekeepers. They just want to keep things the way that they are because change is uncomfortable. Change makes them, puts them in a place where they don't like being. Well, if you're going to be in a leadership position, you kind of have to expect that change is likely on the horizon. So anyway, I don't spend a lot of time talking about emotional intelligence, but I thought these were some key things from this particular blog that was posted, July 5th, 2024, on some random site. I want to give the author credit. Her name is Tina Fey, not the Tina Fey from Saturday Night Live, but a different Tina Fey. So I want to give them credit for this article. But self-awareness and growth, big part of leadership. So something certainly to consider. So I came across this article the other day on Washington Post, and it's an opinion piece. And it says, great leaders are scarce. How do we increase the supply? So, of course, it captured my attention because, this is exactly what I do for a living. I'm creating leaders, hopefully great leaders. Now, concentrated in the education world, whether it's principal or superintendent or higher education, but nonetheless, creating great leaders. So this article captured my attention, and I went through it, and there's some really good points here, and I want to go through some of those points. But this being a Washington Post article, it kind of comes upon on the heels of the presidential election, and whether you're on the left side or the right side, it's irrelevant. I'm not talking about politics here, but it comes on the fact that the two people running for president happen to be kind of old. They're in advanced years, both these individuals, and for some reason in the United States that bothers us. We tend to have some reservations about someone being the president of the United States, which we view as a pretty important position, a stressful position, and a very busy job that's constant, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We've seen how presidents have aged over the years. I think it's one of those very stressful jobs that does that. But my point is that I think it bothers a lot of Americans to know that whoever is going to be elected is going to be an older individual that maybe we're comfortable with. Now, in other countries, that might be considered okay. But here, that concerns us. Now, let me point out, just because you have advanced age doesn't mean you can't do the job, no matter who you are. And the benefits of being much older, of course, is the fact that you have a lot more experience, whether it's politics, business, whatever. It doesn't matter. You know a lot more people. You've been through a lot more situations, so you have an understanding of how things work. And so there is value in that level of experience. And, of course, that's important. Now, whoever's watching or listening to this podcast, I assure you, none of us, including myself, none of us are neurologists. We don't have a deep understanding of what advanced age does to the brain. We don't have that information collectively, and we're not experts in that area. So just by looking at a person and seeing how they act on TV doesn't necessarily mean that they're incapable of doing the job that's before them. So I'm going to make that clear. No matter how old you are, that should be irrelevant. But I wanted to give you some context to why this article is being written. So what Garrett Graff does, and he's the contributing columnist for Washington Post. And if you're in my class, I've posted the link so you can go and read the article for yourself. But I wanted to point out a couple of things that really resonated with me as we explore leadership together. So let's talk about this. So one of the first things he does is he goes to a headhunter to ask some of these questions. Now this, which I thought was odd anyway, but okay. This person's job is to go out and find great leadership to fill in nonprofit jobs, government jobs, and so on. So he's looking for leaders, and he's asking, who are America's best leaders? What can we learn from them, and how do we make more of them? Well, we're doing this in higher ed anyway. There's lots of leadership degrees across the board. I have 2 leadership degrees across the country. So whether it's public leadership or school leadership or business leadership, trust me, we know in higher education what makes a great leader. This has been a science that has been studied for at least the last 50 years. So we already know this. We don't need to go to a DC headhunter to find out. But this headhunter does make some interesting points that I want to point out. So first thing he says when asked, about attributes of a great leader, first he says the leader has 2 important characteristics. First, he is going somewhere. Now, it could obviously be a she, so I don't know why he said he, but okay. First, he is going somewhere. Second, he is able to persuade other people to go with him. Okay. Well, if this person is having trouble finding great leaders, let me just point out that the individual that they're describing is a transformational leader. And while that is an area of leadership that we can teach, I just want to point out that when we consider transformational leaders, we're talking about Martin Luther King level kind of leaders here. We're talking Mahatma Gandhi kinds of leaders here. So they're just not made easily, okay? A transformational leader is a person who understands and can see a vision and can wants to reach people to a certain goal, and they can see that goal, and they can inspire an entire group of people to follow them there. Okay, that's transformational. That's incredibly difficult. Now, we can study those individuals. We can break down their leadership traits. We can talk about vision and personality and cultivating leaders beneath you and so on. We can talk about all those things, and we do. But to be a transformational leader, wow, that is next level stuff. So if he's having trouble finding that person, that might be a reason why. But he does talk about 3 things in the article that I want to break down. The first area that I thought was interesting was, leading in this digital age. We all have cell phones, we all have access to social media, and to be a leader in this day and age with access to the information that we have on the internet and the social media digital age, leaders probably need to have a degree of openness and humility. And I agree to that. I agree with that. And what I mean by that is that, look, I'm 48 years old. Social media is not made for me, okay? So while I'm not old and I'm certainly not young, social media has evolved in a way that it's really more for younger people. So as a professor, I understand a lot of my graduate students happen to be much younger than I am. So I work very hard, even with this podcast, to try to meet you where you are, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or Spotify or YouTube or wherever you need to be. So that means I have to be open to new ideas, new technologies. I have to be open to AI. I have to be willing to explore these areas to my comfort level. That's a part of leadership. So I have to be able to go where you are and try to meet you where your personality is. So I work very hard to do that. Now, even in our graduate world, we're completely online. I don't go into a classroom anymore and teach. And it probably shouldn't be that way. Technology has changed in such a way that I can access you through my camera, which is great. So I have to work as a leader to change how we approach in a social media and a digital age. And that might be something you want to think about too as you explore your leadership. The second thing that he points out in the article, and I feel like he stole this from me because I say this all the time and I tell my son this all the time, and if you want to be a great learner, you've got to have a curious mind. And that goes with leadership as well. Now, having a curious mind means you've got to be open to other perspectives. You've got to be open to a diverse world that is ever changing. There was a great book that was written about 25 years ago called The World is Flat. And the idea behind it is that the internet has actually brought us closer together. And it gave a lot of examples and some research-based stuff about how the internet has connected us together in a way we never even expected. So now it's made the world kind of smaller in a sense that we're exchanging ideas and getting new diverse opinions from other people in a way that we never did before. Now, the problem with that particular book is that was written before the advent of social media. It was just talking about the internet and the sharing of ideas and the connectivity that we have that's virtually instantaneous. It didn't talk about how social media has also changed the way we think and act and even vote, which is really, really interesting. So, but the problem with social media is that what we tend to do is we tend to go to places where we are comfortable, and we tend to interact with people that are a lot like us. And what that creates is these bubbles, whether it's bubbles on social media, communities, schools, churches, and we tend to go to places where a lot of the conversations are the same, a lot of the information is the same, a lot of the ideas are the same, and a lot of the opinions are the same. Well, that's not good. It doesn't create curiosity. It doesn't lend to asking questions and developing another opinion. In fact, in some of these cases, having another opinion is often discouraged. This is exactly how cable news works. Cable news works exactly like that. You are going into a location where someone is going to tell you exactly what you want to hear. They may even be telling you things that you've thought about and you don't want to say out loud. We call that confirmation bias, meaning you go and you seek the things that make you comfortable and justify your own thinking and your own ideas. Now, from a leadership perspective, that's horrible. From a higher education perspective, that's terrible. Higher education has been rooted in the last 1,000 years in having alternative conversations and alternative thought, meaning curiosity, asking questions, having conversations. Look, I'm not doing my job as a graduate professor if I'm not making you a little bit uncomfortable, pressing your thinking, asking questions that you haven't considered before, listening to diverse perspectives. When you go in and do those discussion boards, you're engaging in conversations with other people who have different perspectives, different experiences, different ideas, and have come from a different world. That's what it means to be curious. I work very hard to do that in my own life as well. I don't pretend to understand everything about what's happened globally, but man, since the pandemic, the world has changed and people are working very hard to adjust to the new changes that have happened. What's going on in England, France, Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine, it is fascinating to me. And I don't pretend to know it all, but I do want to gain a new perspective. I do want to hear different opinions on issues. So I seek that out and I ask those questions, and then at least then I have an opinion, an idea that's rooted in something. So I think being curious is absolutely essential to your evolution as a leader, which leads to the third point in the article that I really, really liked. The third point that they make is leaders are always reimagining themselves. Now, I think he was talking about this in a social media context where you're always changing and you're adapting to what new people want or what different people want, and when tastes change, you adapt to that. Okay, I can get that. But I look at this more as you evolve. You evolve with the times, you evolve with opinions, and you evolve with new information. I'm a big sports guy, and one of the sports people that I listen to, and I'm stealing this from him, is Colin Cowherd. Colin Cowherd says all the time, new information, new opinion. Meaning, you talk about some athlete, maybe how they performed 2 years ago, maybe it's different now. Well, now you have new information, and now you have a new opinion. And he talks about that in the context of how maybe sports organizations or sports teams should react when something different happens. And then sometimes sports teams are reactionary instead of being proactive and so on. But the point is, I love the idea of new information, new opinion. Again, that's the essence of higher education. Higher education is all about new information, research, creating powerful, different ways of thinking so that we have better ways of doing stuff. That's essential. And if we didn't do that, we'd still be bloodletting and leeching every time we got a wound open on our arm. That's horrible. We have to adapt. We have to adjust. And it's called evolving. In politics, they call it flip-flopping. But the reality is that you are taking new information that is given to you, you think about it critically, you process it, and you come up with a new opinion that's actually rooted in some level of fact. That's okay to do that. And in a leadership context, you absolutely have to be willing to evolve your position, evolve your policy, to change with the new diverse opinions that are happening. Going back to what I said about what we know about leadership and how we teach it, 50 years ago, some of the things we were learning and studying about leadership did not include some very critical and important people that we include today. A lot of people were left out of leadership positions 50 years ago that we shouldn't have left out. And so now we have more diverse organizations. We have more diverse people working for us. And those people bring in new perspectives, new opinions, new ideas based upon their individual experiences and backgrounds. And there's so much value in that. We shouldn't be resisting that. We should be embracing it with a curious mind so that we can evolve our position. Look, it's only going to make us better. Otherwise, we're just going to be churning out the same old dredge that comes out of our bubble each and every time we retreat into it. So, I think it's important to take a look at this article, read it, process it, have a curious mind, and think about your perspective. Great leaders are scarce. How do we increase the supply? It was written July 3rd, 2024. Garrett M. Graff on the Washington Post. Check it out. Read it for yourself.